Um, my name's Phil LeBrun. I'm part of the enterprise strategy team. We're former CTOs, CIOs, CFOs who work with board of directors and C-suite to help advise on transformations. Does anyone eat at McDonald's here? Oh, come on, it's not a social stigma. I was a former international CIO at McDonald's and used to lead their data development, supply chain, and innovation team until 3 years ago.
My name is Luc Hennekens. Welcome everybody to this session. I've been CIO for Airbus for 4 years, and prior to that I was CIO at Qantas based in Australia.
So what we're here to talk to you about today is not a lot of technology. We spend an awful lot of time talking about digital transformations, data enablement, how to use technology to change your business, your organization. And one of the things we continually hear is, I get that, but what about our people? How do we bring our people along on this journey? So what we want to do today is share some patterns we've seen to be successful in organizations to reskill everyone in your organization. Not just your technology department, but from the CEO down to make them more versed in technology. And there's a reason for that, because do you recall this phrase we used a lot during COVID, the new normal? We're going to get to that new normal. How's that working out? Yeah, exactly. So we've seen so much disruption in the world, political, macroeconomic, social upheaval. There is no new normal. There's a never normal. So how do we give people the skills and the confidence to continue to adapt in today's environment? And you know, the interesting thing about the world we work in is it's all interconnected. There is no simple project plan you can put together for much of what we do in the world. And it's an exciting time for us. It can be exciting, but it can be unnerving. Technology throughout history has improved productivity, it's improved wealth, it's improved health, it's improved education and living standards. There's something in this for everyone. We can bring an entire planet along on a new journey with us. It can make our own jobs less stressful and more fulfilling. But as technology creates opportunities, we need to be proactive in reskilling people to come on this journey with us. This opportunity is significant. Of course, there's all these reports out there, and it depends on which report you believe, but one report cites the cloud alone is a $1 trillion opportunity. Another one states it's a $4 trillion opportunity. Who in their organization has too many people with cloud skills at the moment? Interesting. No hands? We're recruiting. No. And the reality is the potential of the cloud is held back by the skills we have in organizations. We often talk about two things hold organizations back. People, the skills they have or don't have, and their imagination to dream of a different way of running their business. At least 75% of companies acknowledge that this skills gap is a major issue for them. And it's not just about developers. It's also about having leaders who know how to use technology, who know what else to do with technology, how to turn data not just into insights, but to turn it into action on their front line too. And what we see with organizations is invariably in the top 5 issues they have, people feature in at least 3 of those. And it's a pattern that's actually been repeated throughout history. During the Industrial Revolution, technology outpaced skills in organizations. We saw wage stagnation, not that I was around at the time, but I'm told we saw wage stagnation. We saw generations of people who didn't have the skills to keep up with the technology. It's actually a phenomenon called Engel's pause. And it feels like we're going through something similar today. We've got an amazing plethora of technology available to us in the cloud now, but we're having trouble making sure that people have the skills to keep up with it and really take advantage of it. And yeah, this pattern repeats itself. So applications of technology such as machine learning across every sector is automating jobs. In fact, it's predicted over the next 10 years, about 85 million jobs will be eliminated through automation. And these are jobs across every sector, from paralegal through to manufacturing. Another report shows that 1 billion people 1 billion people over the next 10 years will need to be reskilled. And there's a societal expectation that we all invest in our people and we help them be successful. But not just our people, in ourselves too, which is why we're delighted to see you today. Because it's so critical that as leaders, we continue to practice what we tell our own organizations about learning and being curious and acquiring new skills. So there's this massive opportunity to improve everyone's life with the technology we have. Now, it's easy to make excuses about why this gap exists. It's easy to make excuses why folks aren't invested in training. You've all heard of the Great Resignation. Do you feel that's affecting your organization? One of the things I find fascinating is the average tenure of employees across different age groups hasn't actually shifted much over the past 10, 20 years. But there is a fundamental change we see, which is the half-life of skills, the useful life of skills, since the 1960s has dropped by 1/4. So a skill that you could have learned at school in the 1960s that would have lasted you for most of your career will now last about 5 years. So this idea that you learn one thing, use it throughout your career, and then retire is no longer true. We're now in this environment where we're needing to continually learn. And what I find fascinating is if you look at your own lives, as a child, we saw a learning opportunity in everything we did. We had this curiosity, this incessant need to ask, why is the sky blue? Why? Why? There was no fear in asking questions. And yet, often, as life progressed, our learning diminished. And if you look at the average learning curve for individuals, over time, even though the environment you work in is getting more complex, your rate of learning declines. And often leadership has been seen as a role which should have all of the answers. And there's this reticence to ask questions, to show that you don't know something. And it's something I'm proud within AWS. Whether you're Adam or anyone in the organization, no one's shy to say, I don't understand. Can you explain to me why this is so? It all starts with leadership. All of us are leaders. We truly believe that everyone in an organization has an ability to lead. But if you're a manager, if you're a leader, and you don't understand technology or data or organizational change management, how can you recruit the right people? How can you ask the right questions about where the opportunity is to apply technology? If you look at many leaders, most of you look younger than me. I was at McDonald's 30 years. I'm probably at McDonald's longer than some of you have been around. But when I started, I learned to use a PC for the first time at university. I had email at work. I had a laptop at work. Many folks have learned technology in the workplace in a very rudimentary nature, and yet they've never kept up with this accelerating pace of innovation and change with technology. So many executives, when you talk about technology, think about PowerPoint and Excel, so-called productivity tools. I'm not too sure they are necessarily productivity tools. And as a result, what we see with many leaders is one of two attitudes. Either blockchain is the answer, we just haven't figured out the question yet, technology is magic, or alternatively, there's this discomfort. They don't understand the technology, and perhaps it's better to give it to someone else to do on their behalf. How can you possibly generate competitive advantage if your reaction is to push technology to someone else? So it's unfortunate that it's still quite common to hear leaders talk about technology is alien to me. Are any of you bad leaders? You don't like people? You have no understanding of finance? Great. Yeah, only one person. It's normally one person in the room. Of course, all of you have to deal with people. You probably manage people, you develop them, you have to understand finance. You can't say that's the job of HR or it's the job of finance. That's exactly where we need to be with technology in the future, where everyone in an organization isn't necessarily a technologist, but they're comfortable asking questions about technology. And yet, where we are today is, depending on which report you believe, between 6 to 13% of board of director members have enough technology knowledge to do their job. Not to be a technologist, to do their job. Less than 24% of the C-suite have enough technology to do their job. Are there any chief marketing officers in the room by chance? No one's going to admit it? No. I mean, can you imagine being a chief marketing officer and not knowing how to use data to segment and target your customers or to personalize offerings? Can you imagine being a CFO today, not understanding where your technology spend is going, or not understanding how to apply RPA to improve efficiencies? It's simply too important not to understand. So not being digitally literate in an organization from the leadership on down affects everything: profitability, retention, motivation, customer satisfaction, and rate of innovation. And it doesn't take much to change that. Just having one additional board of directors member who is versant in technology doubles the chance that technology will be treated as a strategic asset, not just a cost to be managed.
So at this point, you might be forgiven to ask yourself, how come that Amazon is talking about this topic of learning? And the reason is that as a company, we feel that learning is so foundational to our success that we make it a day-to-day consideration. So we structure teams to accelerate their learning. We make sure that we have opportunities for our staff to reskill and to upskill. We recruit people who know that lifelong learning, career-long learning, is something that's an absolute necessity. One of the great examples of programs that we have internally to help our employees upskill and reskill is the Amazon Career Choice program, which opens up tuition funding to over 750,000 frontline Amazon staff. And we don't limit this to just our internal staff. We have been doing this for years for our partners, for our customers as well. And one of the great examples there is Amazon Skill Builder. Amazon Skill Builder is a great way to help you build the fundamental foundational knowledge about cloud, and even to avoid some of the misunderstandings and the myths that exist sometimes. We've had customers like Roche, Siemens, and Computer Center who have very successfully used over 500 online courses to increase their knowledge and to increase their understanding of the cloud, knowing that they're being trained by the experts. And we go beyond even our partners and our customers by making a commitment to training the general public and upskilling them in how cloud works and the value of it. One of our most famous programs is AWS Restart. AWS Restart is designed to have people with little or no cloud skills to get ready for a career in cloud computing, and helps them connect to employers that can employ them in the future. Now, you might say all of that is a great start, but it really isn't enough. Too often, training is a sporadic activity with the average spend per employee on training almost not changing over the past 10 years. And of course, even if you send people to a training course, you can't expect them to become an expert just by going through a class. The difference, the time difference between when you take a training, when you apply the new knowledge, is such that very often by the time that you actually need the knowledge, a lot of it has disappeared from your mind already. And when you actually start to use the knowledge, what you find is often a lot of gaps exist between what you've learned and what you actually need. It's a bit like, learning to ride a bike if you've never done it before by reading a book, and then 3 months later stepping for the first time on a mountain bike for a 3-week cycling vacation. That doesn't end well. The reality that is often not recognized is that 70% of everything that you learn is learned by doing it on the job, supplemented, of course, by on-demand learning. And so if training is so important for the success of a company like Amazon, and we would argue for the success of all your organizations, then the question we need to ask, and we will, is what does it take to build a truly learning organization that goes beyond simply sending their staff to a classroom training every now and then? And so Peter Senge's popular book, The Fifth Discipline, has a very interesting way of thinking about 5 particular elements that you can introduce in your organization to create a learning organization over time. And the first one of those is systems thinking. Now, systems thinking is the concept that everything that happens in an organization is connected. Everybody is connected to each other. It's extremely rare that value gets created in just one function or in one organization. And so the more that you can ensure that the people in your organization understand how what they do and how they operate, how they act, is connected to what other people need to do, the more you can rely on them to change their way of working for the benefit of everybody. And so modern organizations that are looking at training and learning as a foundation for their success, instead of adding more layers and more rules, what they do is they help their organizations understand how they fit in the bigger picture. And they create, most often, cross-functional teams to work together across the lines to create real value for customers. And we're going to talk a little bit more later on about these cross-functional teams. And secondly, a shared vision is a simple but very powerful tool to help your organization find meaning and direction in everything they do, including their learning priorities. Now, importantly, this is not about creating some fancy-sounding vision statement, but that's really fluff underneath. A vision statement should really be meaningful and empowering and energizing everybody in the organization towards a common goal. And a great example of this was in 1962, when John F. Kennedy went for the first time to NASA to visit the premises there, and as he was walking through the hallway, he ran into a janitor. And so the president shook his hand, introduced himself, and said, "Sir, what are you doing here at NASA?" And the janitor could have easily said, "Well, I'm cleaning the floor like my boss told me to do, like I do every day." But he didn't say that. What the janitor said was, "Mr. President, I'm helping to put a man on the moon." Now, isn't that the kind of incredibly inspiring vision that you want all of your employees to have? This is the kind of inspiration that we want to have in all of our organizations. And managers have an essential role in ensuring that your staff both has that vision and understands it and feels deeply connected to it. The third element is personal mastery. Now, personal mastery is not just about acquiring new skills. It goes way beyond that. It's also about better understanding the environment in which we operate and looking back at how we do things and how we can improve. It's not something that you should do every now and then, but it's something that should really be part of how you operate in your organization. In fact, we think that you and your people should spend at least 30% of their time learning and improving. Now, you're probably going to say, well, 30% of my time, that's a lot. If I do that, that means that the remaining 70% needs to be 50% more productive mathematically to get back to the same level of productivity. We don't have time to do that. We need our full capacity. We have too many things to do already, so spending 30% of that on learning is impossible. We don't have time. And this is exactly where the problem lies. Because the idea that we seem to have is that the workplace, you can only either work or play or learn. They're separate activities. You have to choose one over the other. And the problem is that this attitude, this mindset, fails to recognize that in every single thing we do, there's an opportunity to learn to do much better next time. And the power of improving day after day, week after week, month after month, the impact that that has on productivity is so incredible that it will easily more than offset your 30% investment. It's only when we approach how we do work and how we organize with both a desire to perform and a drive to learn that we will achieve our maximum potential. So when we talk of enhancing skills, we mostly talk about functional skills. And these skills, they are changing at a rapid pace. They're not the same anymore as they used to be 10 years, 15 years ago. And with every reinvent, we are adding more needed skills to that. And this change in skills is something that happens regardless of your role. I mean, of course, for our technology employees, we'll need to add new skills around tech, let's say, artificial intelligence or data analytics. But it would be a mistake to think that this is only applicable to our technology organization. In fact, more than half of all the open job postings that ask for skills like AI and data analytics are for organizations that are not technology organizations. And this is even true, as Phil said before, for traditionally non-tech roles like, say, a CMO or a financial analyst. The second series of skills that is really key are your business skills. And so your business skills are really about how do you make money in your organization if you're a for-profit organization? How do you deliver your services? How do you create value? How do you get things done? How do you find your way around? And we would argue that it's actually a lot easier to train your existing staff who have these business skills on missing technology skills than to do the opposite and recruit somebody from the outside who has got all the technology skills that you're lacking and try to create them on your culture, your way of working, and your business skills. And this goes beyond simply understanding your internal dynamics. This is also about how do you connect to your customer and how well do you know your customer. The third set of skills are the ones that most of the experts emphasize over business and functional skills. And these are what we call the soft skills, emotional and social skills. Now, you have to think about things like managing team dynamics, personal resiliency, understanding how your organization feels. Now, these skills have always been incredibly important, but they have really taken on a totally new urgency. Because whereas in the past century, most of what we did was about following and improving processes, this century is actually completely the opposite. It's about finding ways to find solutions for complex problems with a lot of creativity. So all of this requires what we call a growth mindset, an innate curiosity and a desire to learn and to question norms and assumptions, to have a real authenticity in asking questions. And if you go back to how you were as a child, you didn't have any fear for asking questions. You weren't afraid to fail. You tried out so many things, and so many of those failed, and it was all part of play. And we were really comfortable asking questions and learning from the people that we respected and that we looked up to. And so in Amazon, we've embedded this thinking in a principle, in one of our leadership principles, that's called learn and be curious. So we expect from all of our employees on a daily basis to be curious about the world around them, to be willing to learn new skills. It's about embracing those childhood attributes that gave rise to the period in our life that we learned the most, the fastest. And as a manager, as a leader in an organization, one of the most powerful tools you have to accelerate learning in the organization is to reignite in your employees this desire to learn and to be curious about everything around them. In Amazon, we support this in various ways through rotating assignments, helping people with job mobility, giving people access to self-service issue resolving forums, etc., etc. The other interesting thing, if you think about how you were as a kid, is that we didn't have any of these limiting beliefs, these fixed mental models that we have as adults. Of course, it's very helpful to have these mental models because they help us make sense of an increasingly rapidly changing world based on our past experience and based on our knowledge base. But if these mental models get stale and people get stuck in their old ways of looking at things, it will prevent us from improving how we work. Because learning isn't, as we said before, just about taking in new knowledge. It's also about better understanding the world around us and to readjust our mental models and the way we think about how we work, how we operate, and to focus on continuous improvement of how we work together and how we create value for our customers. Consider the model, for instance, that we use for experimentation at Amazon. We start with a set of base ideas, our existing base of knowledge about the field that we work in, and we make a hypothesis. We define that hypothesis, we're going to test it out in reality, and we observe what happens. And based on what we see and what we've observed, we then either come up with a new hypothesis or adjust the one that we had. But the real learning happens here when, in addition to this, we question our way of looking at the world, our mental models. This is what we call double-loop learning. And this is something that can be practiced consciously every day. It can be applied to internal team dynamics. So how does the team function? It can be applied to your business processes or to your customer interactions. And it's also one of the reasons why it's so incredibly important and powerful to push decision-making as low as possible in the organization, close to where the action is. Because what it does is it ensures that teams, instead of blindly following orders and complaining about how dumb it all is, they take themselves responsibility for observing what is going on, finding what's not working, and making changes until it works, and it works better and better and better. An example of this is what we call our correction of errors process, our COE. And this is largely used in Amazon. It really ensures that when an issue happens, we're not simply satisfied when we solve the issue. We're going to make sure that we keep on asking why the issue occurred until we are comfortable that we've come to the real root cause. And critically, we also look at how we should change our mental model that was maybe at the origin of creating the issue that we've now solved. And instead of just doing that for the team that created the issue and that solved the issue, we're thinking about who else in the organization would benefit from the insights we've just gleaned from our own mistakes. And this is where senior leadership has a very important role to play, in role modeling this, in ensuring that we keep on asking why long enough, and ensuring that the learnings are reflected back into how we look at the world and how we change our mental models. But also making sure that that knowledge is pushed back into other organizations that could benefit from it. Now, the final element of Sengi's model is team learning. And it's something that is deeply embedded in our culture in this organization. The reality is that whilst work gets done by individuals, results get delivered by teams. And high-performing teams are exceptionally good at introspection and at looking how they function and how they can improve and what can be done better. Now, this works in particularly well when a number of conditions are satisfied. First of all, the more that a team has got responsibility for their own outcomes, the less they're going to simply follow orders. The behavior is going to be very different. When they look at what they can improve and they see that actions they take improve the outcomes, it gives confidence and it builds resilience in those teams. The second thing is that if we give those teams complex, interesting problems, that will stimulate collaboration and learning from each other, given that we have people with different backgrounds and different competencies in those teams. And then thirdly, if that team is directed, if the team is directed by, am I doing this or? Fireworks is nice, but a bit early. Finally, if the team's efforts are directed to a common purpose, it generates an incredible amount of energy and commitment to that work. All of this needs to be underpinned by a strong culture of feedback. And in teams, you can do that with debriefs, or you can ensure that the teams share their mental models and learn from each other's. And of course, you can introduce retrospectives on a very regular basis. Importantly, all of this needs to be embedded in an atmosphere of psychological safety, where the teams feel safe to experiment, to ask questions, to fail, and to learn from failure. As a leader, you have an incredibly important role to play to demonstrate this behavior and to show that we learn from our mistakes and that's how we get better. In successful agile learning organizations, there's a very high degree of trust and confidence.
So, correction of errors, your mic's being upgraded. Any Brits in the audience? Okay, I'm just going to stereotype an entire nation. I'm a Brit. Often I look at this glass half empty if it has any liquid in at all. And all of this makes sense. And yet what we often hear is yes, but. Let me share with you 5 of the yes, buts we hear from folks we talk to and how we try and overcome those. Because many of these myths are actually mental barriers. They're not actual barriers within the organization. And firstly, there's this myth that I cannot afford all the skills I need. I'd start by asking, can you afford not to have these skills in your organization in the first place? The reality is, if you take a strategic view on the skills you need and how to acquire them, they can be remarkably cost-effective to embed in your organization. You need to ensure that you're deploying your top talent to the areas that really matter to your business. Often we ask the question, what makes you you? What makes your organization competitive, unique, special? Putting that top talent into the areas that make you special and then providing coaching is a great accelerator for individuals with the potential and your organization itself. And it's something we reflect in our own leadership culture. I mean, we have another leadership principle, which is hire and develop the best. We treat people as assets to the entire organization, not just to an initial role or an initial team they're recruited into. And yet, this is called Price's Law. And Price's Law says half of the total contribution to organizational outcomes and successes is the square root of the number of people in the organization. So if you've got 100 people, often you find there's 10 folks who are driving a lot of the outcomes in that organization. So your talented employees, the ones you've invested coaching in and training in, are often the ones that are having a disproportionate impact on your organization. And yet, if you look at talent management processes in many organizations, does anyone use the, 20-70-10, 20% top talent, 70% a few? I think Jack Welch came up with it in GE, not his greatest moment, to be honest, because it's misapplied. Every function comes up with their top 10 or 20% of talent. If you're an engineering company, facilities team has 10, 20% of the top talent. Marketing does, engineering does. And it becomes a way of allocating pay and bonuses rather than a real talent management process. What we see those organizations do well, who recognize the impact of top talent, is they will reallocate that talent to the areas of the business which have the biggest impact. In fact, in some organizations, 95% of their top talent is moved into roles which are driving that business's competitive the ability to be competitive. And you may say, how can you take someone from facilities and put them in an engineering role? But it goes back to what Luke was saying. Often, it's the attitude of the employees which matters the most. Are they willing to learn? Do they get excited and fired up by purpose? Does the purpose of your organization appeal to not just their head, but their heart as well? And are you investing in really making sure those individuals are succeeding in their roles? And this approach needs to cut across your entire organization. No one wants to give up their talent. If I have a high-performing team, I don't want to say, take my talent. So it's really important as a leadership team, you're looking across your entire organization and making sure you're allocating talent in the right areas. The other thing top-performing teams do well, top-performing organizations do well, is they take a strategic view of skills in their organization. They look at, what skills do I have? What skills will I need in the future? And how's our industry and business changing? And what does that mean to the skills I will need even further into the future? So we view skill sets not as a fixed attribute of an individual, but something that will change over time. And quite simply, if you think about the skills you need to acquire, you can start to look at which skills will we need less of in the future, which skills will I need more of? Will I need less mainframe programmers in the future? Can I start to cross-train, retrain some of those folks to be comfortable with Python? Become data scientists, perhaps? We've seen this done, and it's amazing. Anyone manage a mainframe here? You're heroes. I mean, they're complex. They have often 50 years' worth of organizational knowledge embedded in them. Many of the folks who've developed the mainframes are no longer in your organization. In some cases, they're no longer even on this planet. So you've got this incredible talent in your organization that you can invest in and really liberate and put at the forefront of your business. So we look at retraining and reskilling as a P&L. And of course, reskilling is never completely free. But you have to consider it at an organizational level, not just at an individual level. As Luke said, the amount of training dollars spent per individual has barely moved. The only reason it's moved is inflation in reality, even though the world is more complex around us. But by incorporating learning into everyday activities, a lot of that large upfront cost organizations often go through can be avoided. Have any of you experienced those fads that happen? Some of you have been around for a while, where you were sent on TQM training or Six Sigma, lean manufacturing. The entire organization is going to learn Six Sigma, and then you never get to practice it. You can avoid a lot of that unnecessary capital outlay by looking at how do you incrementally develop folks' skills. One of our own studies shows that using simple things like training and certification, but then allowing individuals to practice what they've learned immediately in the workplace, has about a 6-month payback, which is pretty good, a pretty good investment, and is more cost-effective than trying to recruit all your skills externally. Okay, so many organizations get what I said, but then there's a second myth. We don't have time to invest in learning. You heard Luke talk about the 30%. Proclaiming there isn't enough time is simply the wrong way of framing the problem you face. We're all busy after all. We're bad, as human beings, we're bad at prioritization. We're really good at deciding what our priorities are. We're really bad in deciding what we're not going to do. And what we see is organizations that become increasingly complex lose the top talent first. So the more complex your organization becomes, the people who have the passion, desire, and skills to help your organization succeed feel like they can't get anything done, and so they leave. Which is interesting, given we talk a lot about digital transformation. And at the end of the day, digital is about becoming more responsive. So stealing something from my colleague's home country, there's nothing more precious than time. So instead of the leader who just comes up with new ideas, how about being the leader who ruthlessly eliminates those activities in your organization which are preventing people acquiring new skills? There's a phenomenon, a law called Parkinson's Law. A British civil servant in the 1960s reckoned that bureaucracy grows by about 6% a year if you do nothing. So it's not good enough to do nothing. You have to literally root through your organization. What are all those processes that are sucking the life out of people? What are those things which are preventing people getting their job done and just increasing the number of governance and steering meetings you have? What I found really interesting during COVID is, pre-COVID, this was a typical breakdown of an individual's time. There's a study out there that says that a typical manager should understand about 80% of what his or her employees do. Using machine learning, looking at emails and work activities and the such like, an academic organization found out that can be as low as 4%, understanding only 4% of what an employee does. So what is it that your people are spending time on? They're not to blame. They're working in the environment that has been created for them. What happened during COVID is with less meetings, with less overhead, individuals invested more time in learning and in productive activities, externally facing work, rather than the managing up, down, and across. How can we create that sort of environment where people feel like there's the opportunity to learn and spend even more of their time on the things that matter to your customers? Some simple ideas. How do you redesign work? How do you optimize work, and how do you automate work? So how do you look at what your employees are doing, what you do as a leader? How much time do you spend in meetings, for instance? There's an interesting study done a while ago that showed the average manager spends, I think it was 60% of their time meeting other managers in their organization, and about 40% of their time writing reports for their organization's consumption. How do you minimize that? How do you automate it? This isn't about replacing people. It's about replacing some of the bureaucracy so you create the freedom or the time for those individuals to learn. Interesting factoid for you. Before the 1900s, the word priority didn't have a plural. Has anyone got one priority in their organization? Has anyone got 400? Yeah, a few more hands. Exactly. Too many priorities, too much multitasking. The third issue we hear a lot about is we don't believe we have the right people in organizations. And this is a real excerpt from a job rec I saw years ago. This individual must have a GPA of 4 and 3 degrees and have transformed 2 companies completely with artificial intelligence. Anyone going to apply? Anyone done that? It's a unicorn employee, that magical employee that is going to come in and change everything. Or even better, rather than recruiting one unicorn, let's go find a herd of unicorns. Let's go set up a digital unit. I'm not saying this is necessarily a bad thing. Done badly, it's a bad thing. And often we create this special organization over here. And it creates this tension in organization. The existing organization looks at, let's say, the digital organization, and you think you're so special. You've come into my organization, and now you tell me everything's wrong. And the digital organization says, good news, we're here to save you. It doesn't work. Too often, that separation between teams, those individuals don't understand how work gets done in your organization. What works, what doesn't work, some of those lessons learned. Bringing in new talent, combining them, sitting them next to many of the folks who are already in your organization, that's a winning formula to help the new folks understand how your business works and the folks in your organization to understand new ways of thinking about things. So our philosophy is quite simply, often the team you need is the team you have. They may not have all of the skills you need. They have knowledge of how your business works. They have existing networks in your organization. They often have a passion for your brand, for your organization, that simply you can't just recruit in. And best of all, these individuals are available immediately. Most leaders know that upskilling folks is much more effective than chasing unicorns. Investing in team training and team learning has a massive impact on motivation. It has a positive impact on loyalty, on productivity in organizations. So by all means, recruit externally, but don't write off the people in your organization today. Start pragmatically. Bring these people together, as Luke talked about. Start with a specific business priority or challenge. Determine what teams you need, what people you need in those teams. Find the best people you have in the organization to put together in these, what we'd call 2 pizza teams. And then let them assess what their skill gap is. They will be intensely focused on the need to succeed, in learning in the moment and driving towards the business outcome. We've both used these in past organizations, and they're magical. You see the energy created when these individuals feel they are in control of their destiny. And like the example with the janitor, they feel like they can really do something of meaning to the organization. That creates the seeds of your learning organization. Myth 4, and I still don't understand this one, but I do hear it occasionally. Well, my employees, they don't want to learn. Really? Has anyone finished their learning for the rest of their life? Good. Yeah, no one? Good. Okay. The idea that folks don't want to learn is ridiculous. Often, though, we talk about resistance to change. People don't resist change. They resist being changed. So I've never met these mythical individuals. The people I have met are individuals who have been told to learn skills for no apparent reason. They can't understand how this is going to help their job. So how do you help create this environment where people understand how these skills are going to help them and given the opportunity to practice these skills? Let me give you an example. Let's say you're a rock star data center engineer. For the last 25 years, you've been brilliant at running data centers. You just do it naturally. And then I'm your boss. I come along and say, good news, Johnny, we're moving to the cloud. Your natural reaction as a human being, my natural reaction in this situation is, I don't know anything about it. This isn't the right thing to do. My data center's great. It's got us through 25 years. And then eventually, there's fear. I know nothing about the cloud. How can I be successful? I've been successful for 25 years, and now I have this new technology. And then slowly, given the right support, the right psychological safety, there's hope. They may not be as effective in the cloud initially, but they start to acquire the skill, and eventually you end up with a rock star cloud engineer. And part of the reason we believe incremental learning is so important is often we get very comfortable in organizations. Yeah, every now and again we go on a training course, but we don't actually change what we do, that comfort zone. In other cases, Suddenly, all of this technology changes and we need skills desperately, and we're pushed into this panic zone where we're being asked to acquire skills and we're not given the time to actually practice them. So how do you create this pace of learning in your organization where people are acquiring these skills ahead of time and having the opportunity to practice them? So you end up with this situation where the entire organization is being brought along on a journey where everyone's skills are improving over time. It's not about having 50% of people certified in a particular skill. It's about, just like an agile team, measuring relative improvement. Agile team would measure things like delivery velocity, not to get to one release a week, but to get better and better and better. That's how we see training. The other thing I'd encourage folks to do is, how do you create the right incentives for learning? How do you create, for instance, career paths where learning is rewarded? How do you create an opportunity where people can show off their skills? Simple things like that have a profound impact on organizations. For any psychologists in here, I won't belabor this point, but also recognize that different people have different learning styles. Some people are going to gravitate to a new technology and go learn in their own time. Other folks are going to say, here we go again, the boss has said, I need these new skills. If I leave it long enough, they'll change their mind and we can go back to normal. So you as a leader have to reiterate the purpose. What's the link between the company's purpose and learning these new skills? You have to role model these skills as well. We've seen CEOs and CIOs do things like cloud certification to role model this behavior. And then there's a lot of individuals who are just concerned. They're in that fear stage. How do you recognize their expertise? How do you recognize and celebrate some of their learning, some of the mistakes as they go through this learning process? Fifth learning myth is people will leave if we train them. One of my favorite refrains is this on, I think it was a LinkedIn thing. CFO says to the CEO, if we train people, they'll leave. CEO says to the CFO, if we don't, they'll stay. So a famous CIO, charismatic dude, once said this: it's actually better to create an environment where people are learning all of the time in the organization, recognizing you'll lose some folks, than not having the skills you need in the first place. That in itself will create an environment where people want to learn.
So we've been only alluding to cloud so far, but cloud is really an incredible accelerator of organizational learning. Why? Because it allows your tech teams to develop capability right in the heart of the business. It enables you by automation to free up resources and capital to spend things on, to spend your time on things that really competitively differentiate you. It allows you to try out new technologies without having to spend the capital or write the business case for it. So let's maybe start to draw this to a close. We've seen that modern organizations have seen a significant shift in how they approach organizational learning. They go beyond simply sending people to classroom training and base their learning on regurgitation of what they've heard in a classroom. They make it an ongoing flow of learning about how to do better and creating new skills. They continually also change their own assumptions about what works and what doesn't work. And they understand that they become better through making mistakes. They understand the benefit and the importance of creating this psychological safety that helps their organization become better with every mistake they make. And they see all of this as an investment, not simply as a cost. Now, I hope that just like there are many different ways of moving to the cloud, you've seen that there are many different ways of increasing the competence and capability in your organization. Not every skill needs to change, but everybody needs to learn. Some people might need some incremental training. Other people, maybe more fundamental increase in skills to go and be successful in new opportunities. Some people might have to abandon some of the skills that have served them well over their careers. And let's not forget that we have to recruit people, which we all have to do, into the organization to accelerate the learning curve or to deal with attrition. And finally, don't forget to look at your existing roles. Are you making sure that your people are spending time on the right priorities? Are you making sure that people are not wasting their time on your organizational bureaucracy? As ever, we would say our advice is to just get on with it. Don't overthink this. Start small, learn fast, and scale things that really work across your entire organization. The only barrier to becoming what we've discussed is a learning organization is your own motivation and drive to do it. To end up with, we'll give you 5 things that you could start doing right next week when you're back in the office. First of all, and most importantly, create a plan. Think through what it is that you're going to need to do in the future, what skills you're going to need, which skills you don't need anymore, what roles you want to bring in-house, what roles you might want to start outsourcing, and how much recruitment, retraining, and reskilling and upskilling you'll have to do as a result. Now, this plan is never going to be perfect, but it's an incredibly useful tool to tell the story of what's ahead of you, first of all to yourself, but also to your organization and to your stakeholders. The second thing is that we hear lots of people complain about how siloed their organization is. Well, break the silos by mixing people up. Diversity in teams is the best way to deal with narrow mindsets. It creates creativity. It helps people to learn from each other. Different people with different expertise in the team will start to cross-training each other, and as a result, the overall understanding of what's going on and what needs to be done is increasing. The third thing you could do is to really bring to life this idea of a learning organization by walking the talk. Show to your organization what it means to candidly admit your mistakes and talk about what you've learned from them. As a leader, dive deep every now and then. It's not the same as micromanagement, but it shows people that what they do is important and that quality matters. And ensure that people go after the root cause, to ensure ongoing learning, to ensure that no mistake is left aside to help improve the organization. Create a really learning organization by creating opportunities for people to share their knowledge. Maybe even gamify this approach, giving people tokens for what they've learned and how they teach others. Think about educating senior executives about things that they're too afraid to ask in public, and do it in small teams, in small groups, so that they're not afraid to ask. Institutionalize retrospectives in your organization. Make sure that your teams invest the time in doing this and therefore creating learning. And importantly, consider recruiting people who are excellent learners as opposed to people who just have the skills you need right now. And finally, give power to the people. Let your teams take charge of their own learning. Why not let communities of practice or guilds design their own certification and training programs on behalf of the entire organization? Allow the experts to make other people more skilled in their field of expertise for the benefit of all. Most of this really starts with your own leadership. But we're more than happy to help. We have years of experience in everything we've done with multiple customers. And one of the ways we can help is, for instance, with Amazon Skill Guild, which is a high-touch, customized training program that helps enterprises accelerate their digital fluency and create value. We're proud to have supported many of our customers in this journey, and would be more than happy to do it with you as well. If you enjoyed this talk, our colleagues have a few others that we would recommend you go and listen to if you're interested in the topic of how to drive digital transformation in your organization. I hope that what we've done in the past hour has given you some of the ideas and the inspiration that we feel when we talk about a learning organization to start applying some of the lessons as well. And when you're back home, you can go back to all the resources we have to help you on that journey and to help you get started. And of course, if you have any questions for Phil or I, we'll stick around after this session, or you should feel free to connect to us offline after reInvent. With that, thank you so much for your attention, and I hope you've enjoyed this.